And then the next episode I come back and I'm like, hey guys, never mind. I fraud that. That's classified as a DK weight. I think they're liars. Hello, and welcome back to True Summer Knits. My name is Maddie, and today we've just got another regular knitting podcast for you. I don't have any finished objects today, unfortunately. I have kind of switched up my projects again. I feel like I can often be indecisive on here, and we have another case of that today. But we have 2 works in progress that I'm working on, and then I actually have a good amount of acquisitions. I've had a couple of these yarns for like a couple of weeks now, but I put out my knitting podcast every 2 weeks, so this is just the first chance I'm getting to tell you about them. But I will get started with my first whip. Now, a little preamble for this whip. This yarn was being used for a different project in my last episode, and that's kind of the indecisiveness I was talking about because, I feel like this has happened a few times where I show you guys a project, I have like a lot of progress done on it, and then the next episode I come back and I'm like, hey guys, never mind, I fraud that, this is what I'm doing actually. And it's the cloud blouse, if you're wondering. I was working on the cloud blouse last episode by Petite with the Knitting for All of limestone yarn in merino and mohair, which I will show you in just a minute. But I did like the design. It was nothing wrong with the design. It was nothing wrong with the pattern. I am excited to knit that someday. And I actually got a good amount of progress done. I think I stopped when I was about to join Under the Arms because I had done a gauge watch. I always do gauge watches. And it seemed like it was accurate. But then as I'm knitting it, I'm looking at it and I'm like, this feels like it's pretty small, especially for a drop shoulder sweater. Like, when I look at a drop shoulder sweater, I kind of imagine it's gonna go a little past my shoulders, you know what I mean? So that it can fit correctly or like fall correctly. But it was looking pretty small. When I put it on, it felt like the edges of it only came to like right about here. And that felt very small. And it was really concerning me. So I sat down and I measured my gauge again. And I couldn't get like 100% consistent with what my gauge is exactly. I feel like measuring your gauge exactly is a little more difficult than it's made out to be. And all I knew was that I believe the gauge was meant to be 20 stitches per 4 inches. I definitely wasn't getting 20. At best, I was maybe getting 21 or 22, but in other places, it looked more like I was actually getting like 24. So I was a little concerned about that, and I just figured either I just start over and do more swatching, or I could just pick a pattern that's better suited for this yarn and go from there. And I did that, and I think that was a good decision. So here's what I cast on instead, and I've actually made a lot of progress. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that I've already posted about this a bit, so if you do know, don't tell other people the spoilers. Just let them find out on their own. This is the Paul sweater by Moreca Knits. Let me make sure I'm getting you a good show here. As you can see, let me see if I can just kind of throw this on over my clothes for you. This is a really beautiful sweater. Can you get out of there? So obviously it's a little difficult to fully show you what it's going to look like, but as you can see, I have knitted the upper body. I've connected it under the arms and knit a few inches under the arms, and instead of going and finishing the body right now, I decided to first go and finish the sleeves, because even though I should have enough yarn to finish this, I'm a little concerned that I won't, so I'm just going to go ahead and knit the sleeves. Also, I tend to like things shorter anyway, so if I feel like if I knit the sleeves, I have both of them fully done, and the neckline, then if I need to, I can just knit basically until I run out of yarn and not have to stress about like making sure I'm going to have enough yarn for the sleeves, which, to be honest, that's generally what I like to do anyway. Like, ideally, I try to do finishes or sleeves or things like that before I finish the body, because I feel like it's so much more motivating to work on a big body when you know that when you're done with the body, you're done. Like, I get that for bodies. Like, I get a little, I don't know if the word is discouraged or just like a little burnt out, if I know that I'm gonna have to do sleeves on it. But I never feel that way about sleeves. Like, sleeves never feel like that big of an undertaking for me, because I just do feel like it's just a lot less knitting. Like, I know a lot of people talk about getting caught on Sleeve Island. I just feel like I get that for body knitting. So if I can just work on the body, and then I know that when I'm done, I can just bind off, weave in my ends, and I'll be finished, that is just much more motivating and much more satisfying for me than finishing the body and then going back to knit the sleeves. So that's why I went ahead and I knit the V-neck, and I'm starting on my left sleeve, and this is really cute. I haven't actually been able to try it on with the sleeve progress that I've done. I'm just going to keep this on so you can kind of just see how it's going, because I'll take it off to show you the back some, but as I described to you the construction, I'll just keep this on like this. So this is a saddle shoulder design. As you can see here, the shoulder extends to this back, and I'll show you that more in detail in just a second, and I'll take it off for you. But you cast on right here. There's like an invisible line where you cast off, or cast on, because you cast on with a provisional cast on. So you use a crochet hook and you cast on that amount of stitches, and then later those stitches are picked up to form the sleeve. We'll get to that later. So you cast on this and you knit this square here, essentially, basically. So for a little while you're just knitting a square, and then when you get here, you continue working towards the back here, and I'll show that to you. So you can see, once you get to this point, you're doing short rows to start shaping this back neck, and I think it's short rows or is it decreases? I want to say I think you bind off first, and then there are some short rows, because you do have to also shape the shoulders, but that might be a little later on. I'm sorry, I'm not 100% sure. But then you continue and you knit to here, to this center back seam. It's kind of hard to tell, but there is a seam there. And you do the same thing for the other shoulder, just like in reverse. And then you do a 3-needle bind off to join those two pieces in the middle, which I had never done a 3-needle bind off before, and it was very simple. I'm just going to try to give a little explanation for what it is in case you don't know. So basically, you would have the two pieces on your knitting needles with the two knit sides facing each other, and both of these sides have the live stitches. So you'd put them on top of each other. You need a third needle. They say to use the same size needle as your project, but I didn't have another needle easily available for me that I could use. So I sized down. I think I did 3.5 or 3.75 millimeter needles for that third needle. And honestly, I feel like going down a little bit was like a nice choice, because I feel like it made a very clean, is that showing? It made a very clean, tight seam, if you can see here. It's not perfect. I'd never done it before. But you put the two live stitches on top of each other, and then using that third needle, you basically knit together each live stitch with the live stitch of the other piece behind it, if that makes sense. But you can also see on the inside where that seam is. I've got a lot of ends to be woven in, obviously, but still, it looks really nice. I don't know exactly why she decides or chooses to have that center back seam. I'm sure theoretically you could, I guess, omit that and sort of do some figuring to just knit that entire back piece in one piece, but I didn't have any issue doing it. But once you have constructed the back pieces, you flip around to the front, and stitches are picked up along here, right across this line. And then you work short rows so you can get more shoulder slope, and then increases are worked because obviously you need to shape that V-neck. And then you do that for both sides. You knit down, do increases for the underarms here, both in the front and the back. And then once you join, it's just stocking it all the way down until you reach the ribbing at the bottom. So it's just simple 1x1 ribbing. So the only real difficulties with this pattern would be if you're not used to using short rows. She specifically uses German short rows, which I think if you can do short rows, you can do German short rows. I don't think there's anything difficult about them in particular, but there are a lot of them in this pattern to do all the shaping up here. So if you don't like doing short rows, you may not like doing this pattern. But yeah, and then before I stopped, I did go ahead and pick up all the stitches around the neck. I wanted to kind of get an idea of how it was looking. And like I said, I like to do all the finishing first if I can, so that as soon as I'm done with the body, I'm just done with the entire thing. So all the stitches are picked up. You can see some of my pickups look a little weird in the back. You start at the back, and for the most part, they look okay. Let's see if I can get this to focus. Where is it? No. Wrong side. This side, you can see this line of kind of the stitches is not supposed to be there, and I feel like some of my pickup stitches have sort of these gaps, and I'm not sure why that is. I do wish it was a little cleaner. I assume some of it will block out, and then whatever doesn't, if I really don't like it, I can just, either yank it together with some thread or duplicate stitch over it. And then also here, right at the base of the V-neck, there's also like some little gaps, which she kind of seems to have a little bit of gap in her example or her sample, but I don't really love mine. But I do really like this detail of this line of stitches that goes all the way down the V-neck. That is really simple. You don't really have to do anything extra for that. It's just you're basically increasing with 2 stitches as like the edge stitch from where you increase for the V-neck. So when you pick up one of those stitches, the other stitch is left over to be kind of that little border of the V-neck, if that makes sense. But as for the pattern and itself, she's a wonderful pattern designer. I want to knit all of her patterns that I really like because they just look so professional. Like they look like I don't know, the way they're formatted is just really beautiful. She has every single section very clearly marked with very clear directions. She has links to instruction videos for pretty much every technique. There might be a couple that are assumed, she assumes that you know how to do the Italian bind off. Although I will say, that's another thing I didn't mention. To bind off for the neckline, she calls it an Italian bind off, but it's actually a tubular bind off, I think, because you do the first 2 rounds, or the last 2 rounds, you do double knitting. You slip 1, knit 1 round, and then purl 1, slip 1 the next round, and then you go and do your sewn bind off. If you've done much ribbing for sweaters, I'm sure you've done one of the two. I had never actually done the tubular bind off before, and I know it's kind of an unpopular opinion, but I do think it made it look a little bit cleaner, at least for me. And you can really see me, I don't know if it's so much, I don't think it was really the double knitting that was a little different throughout. I think maybe somehow my tension while I was doing the sewn bind off part wasn't even the entire way through. And at one point it just started looking way better, and I'm really not sure why. Because as I was doing it, it felt like I was doing the same thing the whole time. But see if you can see. So, part looks kind of even. If you see the difference between the regular Italian bind off, do you see how this part up here is a little more opaque the last couple of stitches? It creates just a more robust edge. I honestly feel like it's kind of like having some elastic in there. It just really firms up the very edge of that neckline where you bound off, as opposed to the Italian bind off. And at first it did look a little wavy or kind of flared out, and I did give it a little steam to settle it, and I think it will probably even out even more when I wet block it. I don't know that I would do it every time. I don't know if I would have the patience to do the 2 rows of double knitting and the sewn bind off for a large body, maybe I would. I don't think it was too difficult. It was almost just like doing another round of ribbing. Although when you do the double knitting, your stitches compress so much that I had the neckline on a 16-inch circular needles, I think, or somewhere like around there. And it got so tight that I had to start doing like the traveling loop method where you pull out your needle and sort of use that pulled out needle to knit all the rest of the stitches, because it was fine when I was doing all the ribbing, but it just compressed the stitches or made it so much smaller once you did the double knitting that it was really hard to like knit into those stitches, which was a little irritating, but not like really a con, I would say. I like it. I think it was a good experience. I think it was definitely worth it for this. I feel like it looks the cleanest here at the actual V-neck. I feel like that looks really nice at the edge there. And then in other parts, I feel like I must sound like a fake, because I feel like it actually is looking pretty nice on camera. But, I don't know, it looks a little bit messier there, so you can see what I mean. But, yeah, that's the only technique that's really assumed. She does explain to you how to do the double knitting, but after that she just says to do an Italian bind off. And that was kind of strange to me, because I thought it's only called the Italian bind off if you only do the sewn part and not the double knitting part, but I don't know if that's true. That's what I've always heard online, so I really don't know. But yeah, that's how you bind off for this pattern. I haven't read through the rest of it, so I don't know if you bind off the same way for the bottom of the body, but we'll find out. But yeah, it's going really well. I really do like this yarn, although I loved the color of this yarn in the ball. I can show you what it looks like in the ball. Again, my lighting is a little warm, so it's not a perfect representation, but it is like a grayish, bluish, off-white color. Although I don't know. It's not that I don't like it, but I don't know that it's my favorite once it's actually knitted up, because I feel like it comes off a little bit dingy. In some of my photos, it even kind of comes off as beige. It really is more of like white in person, but it does just have this slight off-whiteness to it that makes it look a little dingy, I guess. So I like it. I think it's going to be a good color for me. But I would just keep that in mind if you're thinking about using the limestone. I don't know. I feel like it's so close to white that it kind of just seems like a slightly dirty white. You know what I mean? I don't know. But I do really like it, and I got my sleeve being worked. Oh yeah, and once you pick up your stitches for the sleeve, obviously you start by picking up that line of provisional cast-on stitches that I mentioned earlier, and then you just pick up regularly around the rest of the sleeve. And you work short rows right here at the sleeve cap, back and forth. It's almost like doing a heel turn for a sock. It just kind of shapes that little cap where your shoulder goes into your arm. Really simple. And then after that, you're just knitting in stockinette for a while, and you're adding in some decreases for the sleeve. And then I'm curious to see why she does this. I don't know if it's just so that the rib isn't compressed at all, but once you get down to the rib, you actually do a row where you do some rapid increases all in one row, and then you start the ribbing. I'm imagining that would just make it like all one length and not like the rib kind of compresses, you know what I mean? But I'm very curious to see how that turns out. But I've said a lot about this. The only thing I didn't mention was obviously I'm using the same yarn for this that I was trying to use for my cloud blouse, and I was saying that my gauge was somewhere between 22 and 24 stitches when I was doing the cloud blouse. So as for sizing for this sweater, the gauge is 22 stitches per 4 inches for the pattern. Again, I can't always decide whether I'm getting exactly 22 or closer to 24, but I did do the math. This is obviously a less fitted, like a more oversized, so there's more room for error. I feel like my measurements fit better into the extra small, but if my gauge is leaning more towards 24 stitches, when I do the math for my gauge for the size small, it comes out to somewhere in between the extra small and small, and I would be satisfied with either one. So I guess it's hard for me to say like exactly the measurements that I'm gonna get, but I know I'll be happy with it either way. And obviously I tried it on for you. It's looking good on me so far. It comes off my shoulders a nice amount. Now that I've connected in the body, it wouldn't be hard for me to just go measure around the bust to see exactly what size I'm getting. And I'll definitely try to give you more information about that the next time I have a podcast episode. And since I post every 2 weeks, I honestly think this might be done next time, but I could totally be wrong about that, because my next whip, my autumnal top, I have a lot to say about, and even though I am basically finished with that, I'm not finished with it, and we'll go ahead and get into that, since I feel like I've said everything I have to say right now about the Paul sweater. Alright, the autumnal top. I had tried it on last night, so let me turn it the right side out. So obviously last time I said that I thought I was going to be done with it this time, and I'm not. Nothing big really came up. I definitely could have. But the summary is that while I am going to finish this and I will have something that I will wear, this is not what I want the final design to be, so I know I'm going to have to re-knit it. And I'll get more into my yarn choice and stuff when I show you my acquisitions, but first I'll kind of tell you what I'm not liking about this and what I'm going to change for my next sample. But first, we'll just talk about where I'm at. I'm going to kind of just awkwardly put this on for you. So I think last time I had joined, or I split for the front and the back. So I did start knitting the front and the back, and you can't see, but the back upper panel is also already knitted. I just haven't connected it, and here I have connected. Here I just seamed it together, and it does fit nice, like in a way. It fits. It's tighter fitting than I want it to be. And here it's hard to tell because it kind of blends in, but I am just doing a little double knitted edge around the armhole, which my needles are still on there. I haven't actually finished that yet. I kind of put that down because once I connected the top here, I realized that it was not what I wanted it to be. I still think it'll look good, it's just going to be tight fitting, and that's not what I wanted. So, in case I didn't put it up last time, I'm just going to put up the Reformation shirt that, inspired me to do this. It's not so much that I need to look exactly like that, but the amount of ease is, exactly what I was looking for. And I feel like in some photos it looked like it had less ease than it did, but now that I try this on, I definitely don't have enough positive ease. I feel like I honestly could go up to, in this I have about 1 inch of positive ease, and honestly I need to measure to make sure that is actually how it turned out to be. I feel like I could do maybe even 4 inches of positive ease, and then maybe do some decreases once I get down to the ribbing, because it's just too tight fitting. That's not what I wanted. I wanted a more relaxed, casual elegance type of thing. But even though that's the case, I do still think I'm going to wear this, and I am going to finish it. But basically I split for the front and the back. I had mentioned that I did those increases at the shoulder to sort of make it flare out a bit, and I think that's part of where I went wrong, because I feel like I did some figuring out based on the assumption that I would do that, and I feel like the increases didn't really work. They looked a little strange. I ended up literally just chopping them off, and then I just strategically picked up some stitches and sewed it together to circumvent that issue. But I feel like the reason it kind of looks like that is more because you have the oversized, or not so much oversized, but you have the positive ease. So there's not so much shaping sending it out like that. It's just that's where it manages to hit your shoulders because of that positive ease around the bust. I don't know if that's making sense. But basically I just need to add more ease around the bust, and then I won't need to do much shaping for the armholes themselves. It'll just kind of fall like that, especially with the shoulder shaping, so it has a sloped shoulder. Also, obviously I had knit this bottom up, which was fine, but by the time I got to the top and I realized that I wanted more ease, like I've already knitted an entire body, so I don't really want to unpick that and go just knit the same thing but with a couple more inches, you know what I mean? So, plus I think people prefer knitting top-down patterns. I kind of prefer them. They're just a little more difficult at the beginning, but I feel like doing this process, I mostly did it bottom up because I felt a little lost about trying to design something like this from the top down. I had to stop for a second, but where I think I was when I re-knit this, I feel more confident about how to go about the construction from the top down. So I'm going to knit this from the top down. In the round, I am going to, instead of doing like the bind-offs and stuff that I did before, I'm still going to do increases, I think, to shape the neckline. I'm going to have to like play around with it a little bit. And I'm going to do short rows for the shoulder shaping, and hopefully it won't be too complicated. The thing is, when it's top down, like I can just knit the top part, and it's easy to re-knit the top part if I don't feel like I like it. Like when I did the basic boat neck tank, when I designed that, I knit the top part, like an entire top part, before I settled on what I liked. So I ended up knitting the top, frogging it, and then starting over, and I got something that I really liked. So I think I'll feel a lot safer about like working on this design. Just the thought of trying to do it bottom up again and spending like a week knitting an entire body, and then finding out like needing to add 3 more inches of ease is not like an easy fix. You know what I mean? So yeah, but I do plan on finishing this specific one. I do want to finish it before I cast on the redo, because I want to knit the turtleneck and see how I like the neck width, the neck depth, because I'm not sure if it'll be good. I hope it'll be good, but I don't know. And since that's the part I have to start with, I prefer to just check and see how the width is before I commit to something and have to start over experimenting all over again. But that's all I have to say about that, and those are my only works in progress. So from the autumnal top, I will jump right into my acquisitions, because one of the acquisitions is the yarn I bought to make another one of these. Now, I knit this in Cardiff Cashmere Classic because I had it, and I wanted something that was a similar gauge and would also have a similar, kind of a similar drape, a little fuzzy, but thinner. And I saw this yarn on Webs when I was just like browsing, and it was 60% off. And this is like a more expensive yarn, but it was 60% off, and I was like, that composition and the color look like it would be perfect for this project. So I bought 5 skeins of it, or hanks of it. I literally have no idea if that's the right amount. I don't know, because these balls come in 25-gram balls, and I have them all like wound up after frogging the last thing I did with it, so I'm not even really 100% sure how much I've put into this yet, and I just wanted to be safe, so I got 5. Hopefully that is enough, and if I have a little extra, you know, I can make some nice house socks with it or something, but I'll show you. Another reason why I wanted this was because the color is beautiful. Can you see it well? The color is not showing super accurately, but I'll put in a picture of the website photo. It's a cool-toned, grayish, mauve, purple color. It's gonna look really good as like a neutral color on me. And this is Rowan Island Blend Fine. So Rowan yarns are always expensive. I've never tried one because they're so expensive, so it was also like a fun opportunity to try a yarn I never would have bought if it wasn't on sale. This yarn is 70% Falkland fine merino wool, 15% baby alpaca, and 15% mulberry silk. So it is a really nice, soft, it's not as soft as I thought it was going to be, but it's definitely not rough. I guess in my head I thought it was going to feel a certain way. And let's see if I can kind of show you the strand. It's already hanked up, but it's like a very specific ply to it. And I don't know what I have that spinning wheel, but I never got really into it, so I have not learned about like what the different plies are called or how they perform. but it's got a very, very light halo to it. I imagine the silk, the merino, and the alpaca, it'll be probably like lighter weight. It feels like a lighter weight kind of strand. I'm hoping it'll have just a little bit of drape to it. You know, it'll feel like a wool garment, but it won't be like too dense. And if you know anything about the Cardiff Cashmere Classic, which is the other yarn I was using, that's classified as a DK weight. I think they're liars. I don't think it's DK weight. I would call it more like a sport weight. And the gauge I got for this top was 26 stitches, and this should be able to give me 26 stitches. It's labeled as a sport weight. Another website had it labeled as a fingering weight, but let's see what it says the gauge is on here. Yeah, it says the gauge on here is 26 stitches by 34 rows, and it's recommended for 3.25 millimeter needles, which is exactly what I use for this. So I feel like this should be a perfect substitute for it. I still would like to, I feel kind of bad because like I'm just subbing an expensive yarn for another expensive yarn, but I just do feel like this would work perfectly. And obviously there's other yarns out there that would work, but this was on sale. The color is beautiful. It's going to be perfect for the vibe I'm going for. So at some point soon, I do need to make like a gauge swatch and do some calculations and come up with plans. And I feel like I need to make myself finish this before I cast this on. But I am excited to use this yarn and to try it out. I guess, I don't know, I have no like plan for like when I want this to be done or like when I want to release the pattern. These early pattern that I'm designing, I'm just doing what I can. Like I'm not being like, oh, I have to get it out in this season. Like I'm gonna take my time trying to design something properly and make it sure it's a good pattern and a good product. So if it's released like out of season or something, maybe it'll take me so long it can just be a spring release. I don't know, but I'm still gonna call it the autumnal top because, well, maybe I won't. But in my head, that's what I've been calling it. So I really like that name. But that was my first acquisition, and I have two more. So I had mentioned that I bought this yarn in my last podcast episode, but I hadn't actually received it yet, and I have received it now. So this is the yarn from my husband's sweater that I'm going to make for him, which I need to start making soon because our anniversary is at the end of October. And that is Trenchcoat by Knitting for Olive. It's a pretty good representation, I feel like, of what the yarn looks like. It's a soft, warm, like tan color, like a very true tan, if that makes sense. I got the merino and I got the soft silk mohair. If you knew my husband, these are like perfect river colors. I know he's gonna love this. It took a lot of like deciding to figure out what color I wanted to get for him. Because you know they have so many browns and like their pictures aren't accurate. I say this every episode, but I wanted to make sure I got like a good brown for him. And he was somewhat helpful, but also he was kind of like, you know, I trust you, just pick what you think will work. So eventually I settled on these. I got 7 balls of each, which my husband's skinny and I feel like that's a good amount of yarn, so hopefully that'll be fine for this project. And I believe I'm still planning on knitting either the front porch sweater or the rhino sweater. Depending on how my swatch turns out. I want to make sure the cables look good with this combo. If they don't, I have the, what is that pattern called by Petite Knit? I'll put it up on the screen because I can't remember what it's called. But I have this pattern by Petite Knit, it starts with an H, and if I don't like the way the cables look in this yarn, then I will just knit him a stockinette sweater. He will love it either way. I know he will. But yeah, I've always talked about these Knitting for Olive yarns, but just give you a little refresher. This is a fingering weight merino, and the gauge is usually 28 stitches on 3mm needles, and I'm going to hold it double with the soft silk mohair, which is a lace weight merino and silk blend. Very fuzzy, very pretty, and I think it'll look really nice. And I've never knit anything for him. I started knitting something for him once, but I never finished it. So I'm excited to actually make something for him. Kind of breezed through that acquisition, but I've talked about that yarn combo so many times, I don't think there's really much more I have to say about it. And then I have one more acquisition and we'll be done for the day. So I also mentioned this in my last podcast episode that I ordered it, but this is Drops Brushed Alpaca Silk in the shade Pacific Blue. This is very true to life. This is a very beautiful color. So basically, if you follow me on Instagram, you know this, but I want to start a series where I knit a project with a budget yarn, and I do a video reviewing the yarn in depth. So if you have any ideas or any yarns that are considered budget that you want me to try, please comment them down below, and hopefully at some point I can use that yarn and do a review on it. Obviously this is going to be like a long-term thing, like I want to knit an entire project with it before I decide what I'm going to. These girls are walking by and looking at me weird. I know I'm an adult, but it still feels weird when teenage girls look at you weird. Anyway, I want to knit a whole project with it so I can actually get like a full, well-rounded view on how I want what I think of the yarn. You know, I don't want to just give like a first impressions. I can give first impressions in like a podcast episode, but I want to do a dedicated video, like really breaking it down. I'd like to, help people figure out their options for like budget yarns. I'm also not 100% sure like what I want to categorize as budget yarns. I'd love to hear your opinions on that. I'm thinking probably like under $5 to $6 for a ball, but obviously it's going to depend on like the size of the ball and like, I don't know, other factors. So give me your thoughts on like what constitutes a budget yarn. Obviously I'm going to try a lot of the drops yarns. I definitely plan, like you don't even have to comment those. Ideally I'm going to try as much of those as I can, but let me know if like other brands that have budget yarns, ones I might not have heard of, or ones that you've been curious about. Really want to hear what your which ones you'd like me to try out. But yeah, the Drops Brushed Alpaca Silk, they have it labeled as like an Aran weight, and honestly I kind of feel like that's true. It's much thicker than a strand of silk mohair, but it's a little hard to tell, if you can tell. It almost doesn't seem so thick, but then I did knit up a little swatch, which I unraveled, and it really fills in the gaps way more than mohair does. So I knit the swatch on 4.5mm needles, which is the recommended needle size, and it wasn't a dense fabric, and if you held it in the light, you could still see that there were like holes in the fabric, and like it wasn't like super tight stitches. But the alpaca is so fluffy and fills in the gaps so much that you can't really tell when you're just looking at the fabric. I plan on knitting a cumulus blouse with this. I should be able to do just one strand of this knit for a cumulus blouse. I think this color is going to look so nice, and I am very excited to knit that and do that video and that series on budget yarns. But yeah, I got 5 balls of that, and that's really pretty much all I have to say about that yarn, my acquisitions, and my projects. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe, comment, like, follow me on Instagram at TrueSummerKnits, and I will see you guys next week with a new video. Bye!